Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everybody.
Now, in a week where the King's choice of Thai made the news, COP28 got underway, and the digitalisation of the pound via a central bank digital currency is under consideration. We'll take a look at the news focusing on local authorities. Finances continue to dominate, don't they, Dennis?
Yes, indeed, Helen. The state of local authority finances is in the news almost every day. But beneath those headlines is a local audit backlog across the whole country, which is severely affecting the ability to account for public funds in a timely way. Here's the story. The Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee has said that the local audit backlog is undermining public trust and is in an unacceptable crisis, which requires urgent attention from the government. In a report entitled Financial Reporting and Audit in Local Authorities, the committee raised alarms over an extensive backlog of incomplete audits and unaudited accounts, some of them being delayed by up to 7 years. This has led to a deleterious cycle in which delays create further delays, and which can only be resolved by a potentially painful reset to the whole system, the report noted. And only 9% of the 2020-2021 local authority accounts had audits published by the September 2021 deadline, and only 12% of the 2021-22 accounts were published by the extended November 2022 deadline, according to the National Audit Office. The committee acknowledged the efforts from the Department for Levelling Up to clear the backlog, which include plans to set deadlines for account preparers and auditors to clear the backlog. But it said DLUC must move quickly to clear the backlog and implement its proposed actions by the end of 2023. And part of its recommendations for fixing the backlog include a call for backstop dates for publishing audited local authority accounts annually going forward. It recommended that DLUC ensure that if an authority and its auditors do not produce audited accounts by the backstop date, then the Section 151 officer of the authority must write to the Secretary of State, to the committee, and to the authority's council to explain why the audit could not be completed. And elsewhere, the report found fundamental weaknesses in council accounts themselves, which are hampering efforts of the public and other stakeholders to hold local authorities fully to account. Clive Betts, the chair of the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee, said, "Serious delays in local audits mean that many councils are not fully sighted to problems while they make major financial and service decisions, with audit delays also leaving local taxpayers largely in the dark." He added, "The current format and content of accounts are so complicated that they are impenetrable to councillors and council officials, let alone the wider public." And he went on, "The government should now lead on work with the audit sector to ensure audits and accounts support the oversight of public spending and strengthen local democracy and accountability." Helen.
Well, anything, Dennis, that helps to more easily understand accounts by the general public, I think, is to be supported because they are complex and it's very difficult to extrapolate meaningful information from them at the moment. Now, in other news, the government says that common sense changes to the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill will safeguard the public, prevent fraud, and unlock post-Brexit opportunities. In a press release, the amendments outlined include new powers to acquire data from third parties, particularly banks and financial organisations, to allow regular checks to be carried out on the bank accounts held by benefit claimants to spot increases in their savings, which push them over the benefit eligibility threshold, or indeed when people spend more time overseas than the benefit rules allow for. The use of biometric data, such as fingerprints, to strengthen national security, with the ability of counter-terrorism police to hold on to the biometrics of individuals who pose a potential threat and which are supplied by organisations such as Interpol. In cases where a child has sadly died through suicide, a proposed data preservation process would require social media companies to keep any relevant personal data, which could then be used in subsequent investigations or inquests. Current rules mean that social media companies are not obliged to hold on to this data for longer than is needed, meaning that data which could prove vital to coroner investigations could be deleted as part of a platform's routine maintenance, and it's hoped the new provisions will sweep that up and safeguard data. Now, the bill entered report stage on the 29th of November, as I understand it. It's also had its third reading in the Commons. It's taken a while to get there, having been originally introduced back in 2022, and it's been beset by problems. Indeed, the first bill didn't make it past second reading, so it's no doubt a relief for the government that it's managed to progress from report stage. Now, Sir John Whittingdale, Conservative MP, said in the debate that the bill will deliver tangible benefits to British consumers and businesses alike, which would not have been possible if Britain had still been a member of the European Union. He went on, it delivers a more flexible and less burdensome data protection regime that maintains high standards of privacy protection while promoting growth and boosting innovation. It does so with the support of the Information Commissioner and without jeopardising the UK's European Union data adequacy. However, there's a particularly interesting comment from Labour MP Sir Chris Bryant during the debate, in which he said, "Sadly, it is part of a growing trend, but legislate at speed, repent at leisure should not be our motto. Some will say something that is commonly said these days, let it go through to the Lords so they can amend it. But I am sick of abdicating responsibility for getting legislation right. It is our responsibility. We should not send bills through that are at best half considered. We are the elected representatives. We cannot just pass the parcel to the Lords." So, on the theme of effective scrutiny, Dennis, there's a new protocol, I understand.
Indeed. And of course, we know scrutiny is integral to good decision-making and to good governance. And as you say, we now have a new raft of guidelines in the form of a scrutiny protocol designed specifically for authorities with devolved powers. Here's more on this. The Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities has issued a new scrutiny protocol providing guidance regarding overview and scrutiny committees in English institutions with devolved powers. The department said, "This scrutiny protocol is a key part of making sure that institutions' overview and scrutiny arrangements are of the highest possible standards for holding them to account for delivery, as well as for playing a critical role in policy and strategy development. This is particularly important when scrutinising devolved powers." The protocol applies to the arrangements of overview and scrutiny committees in all English institutions with devolved powers, including combined authorities, both mayoral and non-mayoral, combined county authorities, again mayoral or non-mayoral, and with regard to their devolved powers. It applies to county councils and unitary authorities that have agreed devolution deals. And in the introduction, De Luc says, "Effective scrutiny is critical for ensuring there is appropriate accountability for the decisions made by local decision makers. When done well, local scrutiny should drive understanding, enhance the performance of services, and improve the outcomes for those people affected by those decisions." It goes on, "This scrutiny protocol sets out the relationship between mayors and directly elected leaders and the combined authority, combined county authority, county council, or unitary authority that they lead. It also sets out how the overview and scrutiny and audit committees hold these institutions with devolved powers and their mayor or directly elected leader to account. In adopting the key principles and provisions of this scrutiny protocol, it goes on that each institution will ensure it has a focus on a sustained culture of scrutiny. Membership on scrutiny committees should be prized and competed for, it says. Retention of members for several years should be common. Members must be able to devote the time to the role. Committees should have the profile and cachet to ensure that their findings are brought to the attention of the public wherever necessary through strong communications." Helen.
Well, strong communications are always key, and something must have gone awry according to a report from the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, who has revealed for the first time that only 40% of children presenting to their local authorities as homeless, excluding unaccompanied children seeking asylum, were so accommodated. In the report, Dame de Souza states that the numbers are concerning, with around 6,500 16 and 17-year-olds reported to be presenting as homeless last year. And whilst around 1,000 of those children were unaccompanied children seeking asylum, that figure doesn't include the large number of children placed in hotels when they arrive. Further, de Souza expressed concern that the data shows just one part of the problem, with children affected by homelessness often not reporting to their local authority and instead relying on informal arrangements like sofa surfing or staying with friends. De Souza said that too many of the children who do present to their local authority are not getting the care they deserve and are entitled to, and was particularly concerned by the fact that the majority of children accommodated were not taken into care. As she stated, statutory guidance is clear they should be, unless they refuse it, with the legal protections that entails. The report shows that only 39% were taken into care under Section 20 of the Children Act, while the majority, 61%, were simply accommodated under housing legislation. Now, that's important because legislation recently introduced around regulating standards for accommodation for children in care aged 16 and 17 only applies where those children are taken into care. And the report demonstrates, as I said, that the majority are not. The other thing de Souza highlights is that in any event, the new regulations only legally allow providers to deliver support, not care. And every child, she says, whatever their age, needs to live somewhere where they can be cared for. And who could possibly argue with that? Now, in other news involving children, schools and OFSTED, Dennis.
Yes, and now for some positive news, and not from where you might expect. OFSTED Chief Inspector Amanda Spielman has made her final report before stepping down, and there is praise for local authorities in what she has to say. Here's the detail. OFSTED has found reasons for optimism in its latest annual report on education and children's social care. However, this is alongside a troubling shift in behaviour regarding attendance and concerns over continued pressure on social care. The 2023 report revealed that overall, 89% of all schools are now judged good or outstanding at their most recent inspection, a slight increase from 88% at the end of last year. Positively, the report acknowledged that some local authorities are making substantial improvements in social care. Amanda Spielman said, "In my last report, I want to draw attention to the progress I've seen in education and children's social care, not just over the last academic year, but over the 7 years I've had the privilege of being Chief Inspector." She goes on, "My final report shows that we can and should be optimistic about education and social care in England. That optimism reflects the remarkable resilience of children and the determination of learners of all ages. And it's also testament to the talent, commitment, and effort of thousands of people working in education and social care." Now, to be clear, the report also highlights the many problems and challenges facing schools and also education and social care. And Amanda Spielman has herself been a controversial figure at the head of an even more controversial organisation. Helen.
Well, that's true, Dennis. And for those who want to hear more about Ofsted, please do watch our vlog for the week commencing the 4th of December. Now, finally from me, we have judgment in the case of Churchill and Merthyr Tydfil County Council. Now, this was the case I previously spoke about on the podcast involving Japanese knotwood, but for which LLG provided some survey data in relation to disrepair cases. The case is important for requiring the use of the council's internal complaints process, and it discussed that in the judgment. Now, at first instance, the county court judge refused to stay the claim based on a passage in Halsey and Milton Keynes General NHS Trust, which dates 2004. by which the court did not have the power to stay the claim in order to compel Mr. Churchill to engage with the internal complaints process. It relied on the judgment in that case. So it was appealed and passported to the Court of Appeal, and the questions before the court were four main questions: whether the judge was right to say that he could not order a stay to compel Mr. Churchill to engage in the council's internal complaints procedure because of Halsey and Milton Keynes. Secondly, whether the court could lawfully stay a claim to allow the parties to engage in a non-court process. Thirdly, what factors the court should consider when deciding whether to order such a stay, depending on the kind of alternative processes which would be considered in this particular case. And lastly, whether the judge in the instant case should have acceded to the application to stay the claim to compel Mr. Churchill to engage in the internal complaints process. Now, crucially, the appeal panel unanimously concluded that observations in Halsey were merely obiter dicta and not part of the ratio. So the Court of Appeal has clarified that whilst Halsey principles remain influential, they are not, quote, a straitjacket that binds judicial discretion. And consequently, the court has the authority to stay proceedings for non-court-based dispute resolution if it is proportionate and preserves the essence of the party's right to a judicial hearing. Now, taken from the judgment, this paragraph sets it all out very succinctly. It would be undesirable to provide a checklist or a score sheet for judges to operate. They will be well qualified to decide whether a particular process is or is not likely or appropriate for the purpose of achieving the important objective of bringing about a fair, speedy and cost-effective solution to the dispute and the proceedings in accordance with the overriding objective. Now, LLG will consider the wide consequences of this judgment, in particular in regards to disrepair, but it is a good judgment for local authorities. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 40, available on the LLG website now. So until then, it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.